September 1940. As London burned under relentless Luftwaffe assault, RAF Fighter Command faced a brutal arithmetic. German fighters outnumbered British squadrons 3-1. Pilots were dying faster than replacements could be trained. Then squadron leader Geoffrey Marsh proposed something so absurd that Air Marshal Park nearly had him court-martialed. What if they could make the Germans chase aircraft that didn't exist? September 7th, 1940. 16:43 hours. RAF Biggin Hill, Kent. The operations room reeked of stale tobacco and fear. Squadron leader Geoffrey Marsh stood before a wall-mounted plotting board, watching red markers multiply across the English Channel like a disease. Outside, the distant thud of anti-aircraft guns punctuated the late afternoon air. The temperature had dropped to 14 degrees, and drizzle turned the airfield into a quagmire of churned mud. The numbers told a story of inevitable defeat. Between July and September, Fighter Command had lost 466 aircraft. Replacement production stood at 269 per month. Pilot casualties exceeded training output by 40%. Experienced flight leaders were being replaced by 19-year-olds with 60 hours of combat time. The Luftwaffe could afford losses, Britain could not. Wing Commander Davies jabbed a finger at the plotting board. "They're bleeding us dry, Marsh. Every sortie costs us pilots we can't replace. Yesterday we scrambled 8 Hurricanes from Kenley. 3 returned. The Germans lost 1 Messerschmitt. 1. Those bastards can lose 20 fighters a day and still come back tomorrow. We lose 6, and we're scraping the bottom of the barrel." Marsh had watched it happen. Good men, pilots who'd survived Dunkirk, who'd mastered deflection shooting, who understood energy management, shot down by sheer numerical superiority. The Luftwaffe's tactic was brutally effective. Swarm formations with overwhelming numbers, force dogfights, exploit superior climb rates. German pilots could choose their engagements. British squadrons scrambled under strength, outnumbered, always reactive. The breaking point came 3 days earlier. Marsh had led Blue Section 6 Spitfires to intercept a bomber formation over Maidstone. Intelligence reported 20 Heinkel bombers with light escort. They found 40 bombers screened by 60 Messerschmitt Bf-109s. The combat lasted 7 minutes. Marsh returned alone, aircraft riddled with 7.92mm holes, hydraulics failing, 1 engine cylinder misfiring. 5 pilots gone, 4 confirmed dead, 1 missing, probably drowned in the Channel. That night, unable to sleep, Marsh walked the perimeter fence, watching searchlights sweep clouds pregnant with rain. His mind kept returning to a tactical problem. German fighters operated at maximum endurance range. Messerschmitt Bf-109s carried 400 litres of fuel, giving them 20 minutes combat time over southern England before reserves forced withdrawal. Every minute a German pilot spent chasing targets was 1 minute less attacking bombers or engaging RAF fighters. What if they could manipulate that equation? What if German pilots could be induced to chase phantoms, to burn fuel pursuing targets that existed only as visual signatures? The idea crystallized watching ground crew test fire extinguishers, white foam billowing across concrete. Smoke, dense, white, convincing smoke deployed at distance, could mimic aircraft contrails, engine fires, or distressed bombers trailing damage. The next morning, Marsh presented his proposal to Group Captain Moore. The reception was glacial. "You want," Moore said slowly, "to fit smoke generators to operational fighters so pilots can fly around making pretty patterns while the Luftwaffe bombs London." His voice dripped contempt. "This is the RAF, squadron leader, not a bloody air show." But Air Marshal Park, exhausted and desperate, saw different possibilities. How much fuel would they waste? Marsh had done calculations. A Messerschmitt chasing a false contact for 5 minutes burns 80 litres. That's 20% of combat reserves. If 10 fighters divert, that's 800 litres wasted. If they pursue to intercept range and find nothing, they abort missions rather than risk fuel starvation. Park studied the plotting board in silence. Finally, "Prove it works. 1 aircraft, 1 trial. If it fails, We never speak of this again. Within 48 hours, RAF Farnborough engineers jury-rigged smoke generators salvaged from training aircraft onto a modified Spitfire Mark IIA. The system was crude, titanium tetrachloride solution injected into exhaust manifolds, producing dense white smoke on demand. Wing-mounted canisters held enough chemical for 12 minutes continuous discharge. The installation added 32 kilograms, negligible impact on performance. Flight Lieutenant James Keating volunteered as test pilot. 31 years old, Lancashire-born, Keating had flown 140 combat sorties. His aircraft, P-7890, carried no armament, guns and ammunition removed to compensate for smoke apparatus weight. "If this works," Keating said, inspecting the installation, "Jerry's going to think we've all gone completely barmy." September 14th dawned clear, visibility unlimited, perfect conditions for the trial. Keating took off at 8:15, climbed to 18,000 feet over the channel, activated smoke generators. Dense white plumes erupted behind the Spitfire, visible for 15 miles. Ground observers reported the effect was spectacular. The aircraft appeared to be trailing severe engine damage, wounded, struggling. Two Messerschmitt Bf-109s from Jägerschwader 51, patrolling at 20,000 feet, spotted the smoke immediately. German combat doctrine was explicit. Damaged aircraft were easy kills, opportunity targets. Both fighters rolled into pursuit dives. Keating watched them come, waited until they committed fully, then throttled up, doused smoke, and vanished into cloud. The Messerschmitts, fuel gauges dropping into yellow, searched for 6 minutes before breaking off. They'd burned 140 litres chasing nothing. Marsh's BARMY Stunt had just passed its first test. But proving a concept and implementing it across squadrons facing imminent destruction were entirely different challenges. The real work was about to begin. The decision to proceed came September 16th, hours after Luftwaffe formations hit aircraft factories at Weybridge, killing 83 workers and destroying machine tools that couldn't be replaced. Park authorized immediate deployment, 10 aircraft modified within 1 week. The deadline was insane. Farnborough's workshops were already working triple shifts repairing battle damage, fabricating replacement parts from scavenged materials. Chief Engineer Arthur Reynolds, 54, Birmingham-bred, pragmatic to his bones, surveyed the task with grim determination. "Right," he told his exhausted team. "We've got 7 days to fit smoke apparatus to 10 Spitfires, while Jerry drops bombs on our heads nightly. No pressure, lads." The physical conditions were appalling. September 1940 was unseasonably cold, temperatures dropping to 8 degrees overnight. The workshops had no heating, fuel oil rationed to 1/4 normal allocation. Engineers worked wearing greatcoats, hands numb, breath misting. Overhead lighting was restricted. Blackout regulations meant working by torchlight after 19 hours. Luftwaffe bombers targeted southern airfields every night. Workshop personnel had learned to recognize the distinctive unsynchronized drone of Heinkel engines, the whistle of falling ordnance. Material shortages created cascading problems. Titanium tetrachloride solution was manufactured at a single facility in Middlesbrough, 250 miles north. Road transport was unreliable. Bombed bridges, cratered highways, convoys diverted. The first shipment arrived 3 days late. Canisters required specialized welding. The welder had been killed in a raid on Southampton docks. His replacement, a shipyard worker with no aviation experience, had to learn aluminium welding techniques from scratch. Every modification required improvisation. Engineering drawings specified AN6 hydraulic fittings. Supply depots had none in stock. Reynolds repurposed fittings from damaged Hurricane undercarriages. Mounting brackets were fabricated from scrap aluminium salvaged from crashed German bombers. Electrical wiring was cannibalized from obsolete training aircraft. Nothing matched specifications. Everything had to work anyway. The human cost was brutal. Fitters worked 18-hour shifts, slept 4 hours on workshop floors, resumed work. Fatigue-induced mistakes were common: cross-threaded fittings, misaligned brackets, electrical shorts. One engineer, Douglas Whitmore, collapsed from exhaustion and pneumonia. He was back at work 3 days later, fever broken, still coughing blood. "Jerry won't wait for me to feel better," he said. Squadron Leader Marsh coordinated between Farnborough and operational squadrons, identifying pilots for specialized training. The selection criteria were specific: experienced pilots with strong navigational skills, ability to operate independently, capacity for improvisation under pressure. 12 pilots were chosen. 8 were veterans with over 100 sorties. 4 were younger, aggressive, borderline insubordinate, exactly the personality type needed. Training began even as modifications continued. Pilots practiced smoke deployment patterns, timing, situational awareness. The challenge was counterintuitive, deliberately appearing damaged while maintaining tactical control. Flight Lieutenant Keating, now lead instructor, drilled basic doctrine: activate smoke at maximum visibility range, maintain bearings suggesting wounded aircraft limping home, monitor pursuit response, disengage when German fighters committed fully. "Your bait," Keating explained during briefings: wounded, vulnerable, irresistible. Jerry sees you trailing smoke, he thinks easy kill, Knight's Cross, promotion. His training tells him pursue, destroy, confirm. That's when you vanish. He's burned fuel, wasted time, and you've cost him mission effectiveness. The first operational aircraft was completed September 21st, 2 days behind schedule. The 7th aircraft was finished September 24th during a night raid that shattered every window in the workshop. Engineers continued working, glass shards crunching underfoot while bombs fell half a mile away. When dawn came, 3 more aircraft were ready. The broader strategic context made urgency absolute. Fighter command strength had dropped to 746 serviceable aircraft. Pilot reserves stood at 11 days at current loss rates. If hemorrhage continued, air superiority would collapse by mid-October. The invasion fleet, 2,400 barges assembled across Channel ports, needed only Luftwaffe dominance to launch Operation Sea Lion. Britain was weeks from existential defeat. September 27, 1940. 10 smoke-equipped Spitfires operational. Pilots briefed. Meteorology predicted clear weather, unlimited visibility. Radar stations reported heavy German activity forming over Calais. The stage was set for the trial that would prove whether Marsh's audacious concept could translate into operational effectiveness, or whether 10 valuable fighters had been wasted on a scheme too clever by half. At 10:35 hours, the first smoke-equipped Spitfire scrambled from Biggin Hill. Flight Lieutenant Keating's voice crackled across the radio. "Tally-ho! Let's show Jerry some magic." October 3rd, 1940. Luftwaffe Operations Room, Château de Beaumont, Pas-de-Calais. Major Dietrich Wolf, intelligence officer for Jagdgeschwader 52, studied sortie reports with mounting frustration. The pattern made no sense. Over 7 days, his fighters had engaged 19 apparently damaged RAF aircraft. 19 perfect interception opportunities. Wounded targets, isolated, vulnerable, yet not one confirmed kill. Every single contact had vanished. "Impossible," he muttered, spreading reconnaissance photographs across the oak table. "Spitfires do not survive structural damage sufficient to produce smoke visible from 15 kilometers. Yet our pilots report targets disappearing, radar contacts lost, no wreckage." Oberst Heinz Grunberg, Jagdgeschwader commander, was less analytical. "Your pilots lack aggression, Wolf. Damaged aircraft are gift kills. We should have 19 confirmed victories." But the combat reports told different stories. Lieutenant Franz Schmidt, 23 years old, 87 combat missions, had pursued a smoking Spitfire over Ashford on September 29th. Target trailing heavy white smoke, altitude 16,000 feet, speed approximately 280 kilometers per hour, suggesting severe engine damage. I dived to intercept, range closing to 800 meters, target entered cloud. When I emerged, no contact. Searched grid pattern for 4 minutes, fuel state critical, aborted mission. Similar reports multiplied. Hauptmann Werner Kessler chased a smoking target for 6 minutes over Maidstone, burned 150 litres, found nothing. Oberleutnant Gustav Hoffmann pursued what appeared to be a damaged Hurricane trailing black smoke. Textbook engine fire signature. The target led him 30 kilometers inland, then evaporated. Hoffmann landed at Calais with 7 minutes fuel remaining, too low to have attempted another sortie. The cumulative effect was devastating. Between September 27th and October 3rd, Jagdgeschwader 52 flew 240 sorties, 73 fighters diverted to pursue apparently damaged targets. Not one interception succeeded. Fuel expenditure for those 73 sorties totaled 11,680 litres, enough for 58 additional combat sorties. Mission abort rates climbed to 22%, triple the normal rate, as pilots returned low on fuel without engaging bombers or RAF fighters. Across the Channel, RAF intelligence officers documented the results with satisfaction. Squadron leader Marsh compiled statistics from radar tracking, ground observer reports, and pilot debriefs. The numbers were remarkable. 10 smoke-equipped aircraft had flown 63 sorties. German fighters diverted from primary missions, 94 confirmed, 63 probable. Estimated fuel wasted, 16,400 litres. Bomber formations forced to abort due to inadequate fighter cover, 7. RAF fighters saved from engagement due to German fighters diverted, estimated 40. The tactical doctrine evolved through trial and error. Pilots learned optimal smoke deployment patterns, continuous plumes when establishing initial contact, intermittent bursts to suggest engine struggling, abrupt cessation when simulating catastrophic failure. Geographic knowledge became critical. Smoke operators led German fighters over areas with heavy cloud cover, industrial haze, or terrain features that obscured visual tracking. The Thames estuary, with its fog banks and shipping smoke, became a favorite disengagement area. Flight Lieutenant David Harrison developed a particularly effective variant. Flying at 12,000 feet over Dover, he activated smoke while transmitting fake radio calls. Red 2, engine failing, losing oil pressure, attempting forced landing. German monitoring stations intercepted the transmission. 2 Messerschmitts broke formation to confirm the kill. Harrison led them inland, climbed through clouds, shut down smoke, and vanished. The Germans searched for 8 minutes, then limped back to France, fuel gauges nearing reserve. The psychological impact on Luftwaffe pilots was profound. Confidence eroded. Veteran pilots began questioning contact reports. Was that damaged bomber genuine or another phantom? Should they commit to pursuit or maintain formation discipline? Every decision carried fuel consequences. Hesitation cost opportunities. Aggression wasted resources chasing ghosts. Oberst Grunberg recognized the pattern October 7th, reading his 5th consecutive report of targets vanishing. "They're deceiving us," he said quietly. "The British have created a tactic specifically to waste our fuel. These damaged aircraft are deliberate deceptions." Major Wolf nodded. "Smoke generators, creating false signatures, exploiting our doctrine that damaged targets are priority kills." But understanding the deception didn't provide solutions. How to distinguish genuine damaged aircraft from deliberate decoys? Visual assessment was unreliable. Smoke signatures were identical. Radar couldn't differentiate. The only certainty was committing to pursuit and discovering 6 minutes later that the target had vanished and fuel reserves were critical. Luftwaffe commanders issued new directives. Ignore apparently damaged targets unless confirmed by multiple observers. Maintain formation discipline. Prioritize mission objectives over opportunistic kills. But doctrine was easier to write than enforce. Fighter pilots were trained for aggression, rewarded for individual kills, psychologically primed to exploit vulnerability. Telling them to ignore wounded targets contradicted every instinct. By mid-October, the cumulative effect was measurable. German sortie effectiveness declined 18%. Bomber losses to RAF fighters increased because German fighter cover was compromised by fuel limitations. The tide hadn't turned, but its momentum had shifted. 10 modified Spitfires, flying audacious deception sorties, had created tactical chaos that degraded Luftwaffe operational capacity by quantifiable margins. In operations rooms across southern England, RAF commanders recognized they'd stumbled onto something extraordinary. Not a war-winning weapon, but a force multiplier that made scarce resources stretch further. The BARMY smoke stunt had proven itself. Now the question was, how far could it be expanded before the Germans developed effective countermeasures? November 15th, 1940. The Battle of Britain was over. Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion threat receded. Fighter command had survived, barely. Final statistics: 1,042 RAF aircrew killed, 1,744 aircraft destroyed. Luftwaffe losses: 1,977 aircraft, 2,698 aircrew. Britain had won the narrowest of victories, paid in blood, courage and desperation. The smoke deception operation, designated Project Wraith in classified documents, flew its final sortie November 10th. Across 4 months, 27 modified aircraft conducted 347 sorties. German fighters diverted, 682 confirmed, estimated fuel wasted, 87,000 litres, equivalent to 435 fighter sorties. Bomber missions compromised due to inadequate escort, 43. RAF pilots saved from engagement, estimated 220. But the true legacy transcended statistics. Project Wraith represented a fundamental shift in how Britain approached aerial warfare. Throughout 1939-1940, RAF doctrine had emphasized direct confrontation. Meet German formations head-on, engage numerically superior forces, accept casualties as inevitable cost. Wraith demonstrated that tactical deception, properly executed, could achieve disproportionate results without firing a shot. The concept influenced subsequent operations. In 1941, RAF Bomber Command deployed Window. Aluminium strips dropped to create false radar contacts, overwhelming German air defense. In 1943, Operation Mincemeat used planted documents on a corpse to deceive German intelligence about Allied invasion plans. In 1944, Operation Fortitude employed phantom armies and fake radio traffic to convince Hitler that Normandy invasion would occur at Calais. Each operation shared Wraith's core principle: exploit enemy assumptions, manipulate perception, force adversaries to waste resources pursuing illusions. The pilots who flew Project Wraith received no public recognition. The operation remained classified until 1968. Flight Lieutenant James Keating, the first pilot to test smoke deception, survived the war, retired as group captain, never spoke publicly about Wraith. He died in 1982, obituary making no mention of his contribution. Flight Lieutenant David Harrison, who developed radio deception variants, was shot down over France in 1942, survived as POW, returned to Britain in 1945, worked as commercial airline pilot, refused all interview requests about wartime service. Squadron leader Geoffrey Marsh, whose BARMY proposal started it all, was promoted wing commander in 1941, commanded a fighter wing in North Africa, invalided home in 1943 after crash landing with shrapnel wounds. He received the Distinguished Service Order, citation mentioning initiative and tactical innovation. The specific nature of that innovation remained secret. Marsh left the RAF in 1946, became civil engineer, designed bridges across northern England. When historians discovered Wraith documents in 1968, they contacted Marsh. His response was characteristically brief: "We did what needed doing, nothing more." The broader impact extended beyond military tactics. Post-war analysis revealed that Wraith's success challenged fundamental assumptions about resource superiority. Germany had possessed greater industrial capacity, more aircraft, larger pilot reserves. Britain won because it fought smarter, exploiting every advantage, creating force multipliers from innovation. A dozen smoke generators, fabricated from scrap materials by exhausted engineers working through bombing raids, had degraded Luftwaffe operational effectiveness by measurable percentages. That lesson influenced Cold War strategy. NATO planning emphasized qualitative advantages over quantitative superiority, assuming Soviet numerical dominance required Western tactical innovation. British defense doctrine prioritized adaptability, improvisation, creative problem-solving, the same qualities that birthed Project Wraith in a desperate September when invasion seemed inevitable. In 2008, the RAF Museum at Hendon opened an exhibit on Battle of Britain deception operations. A restored Spitfire, Mark II, fitted with reproduction smoke generators, occupied center display. Beside it, enlarged photographs showed engineers working by torchlight, pilots briefing before dawn, plotting boards, tracking phantom contacts. Veteran testimony, recorded decades earlier, played on audio loops. Arthur Reynolds, the chief engineer, his voice aged but clear. "We knew we couldn't outproduce Germany. We knew we couldn't outfight them numerically, so we outsmarted them." That's the British way, isn't it? Make do, improvise, win through bloody-minded ingenuity. The exhibit's final panel posed a question. Could Britain have survived without tactical deception? Historians debate the answer. Some argue Wraith's impact was marginal, symbolic rather than decisive. Others calculate that 220 RAF pilots saved from engagement represented irreplaceable experience, that 43 compromised bomber missions reduced civilian casualties, that degrading Luftwaffe effectiveness by even 5% created cumulative advantages that changed outcomes. Perhaps the definitive assessment came from Luftwaffe records captured after war's end. Major Dietrich Wolf, the intelligence officer who first recognized the deception, was interviewed by RAF historians in 1947. Asked about Wraith's impact, he responded, "It destroyed confidence. Every damaged target became suspect. We questioned every visual contact. That hesitation, that moment of doubt, cost seconds, minutes, fuel, mission effectiveness. You convinced us that nothing we saw was trustworthy. That is psychological warfare at its finest." Project Wraith embodied the spirit that defined Britain's finest hour. Outnumbered, under siege, facing imminent destruction, ordinary people, engineers, pilots, commanders, refused to accept defeat as inevitable. They improvised, experimented, took risks on ideas that seemed mad. Geoffrey Marsh's BARMY proposal, dismissed initially as fantasy, became operational reality because desperate circumstances demanded audacious solutions. The smoke had long since dissipated. The aircraft were scrapped, the pilots scattered into peacetime anonymity. But the legacy endured, proof that innovation, courage, and creative thinking could overcome material disadvantage. That when conventional approaches failed, unconventional solutions could change history. That sometimes the best way to win wasn't through force, but through making the enemy chase ghosts until exhaustion forced surrender. Britain survived the Battle of Britain through many factors: radar technology, brave pilots, Churchill's leadership, civilian resilience. But also through moments like this, when one squadron leader's impossible idea, executed by exhausted engineers and fearless pilots, convinced the most powerful air force in the world to waste resources chasing phantoms. That was the genius, the absurdity, the essential Britishness of Project Wraith. And it worked. If this story of ingenuity and resilience moved you, subscribe to keep exploring the untold chapters of British history. What other brilliant deceptions turned the tide of war? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's ensure these forgotten heroes are remembered. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join us next time for another remarkable tale of courage.